Hi everyone, this week we're going to talk about the prehistoric Mediterranean. We probably all have some ideas of the achievements and events in ancient Greek and Roman history that are particularly famous, but in these early weeks of the course, we're going to set the context for these societies. When did they develop? What kinds of things were going on in the Mediterranean world in which they developed? And so we're going to begin by looking at the prehistoric period. Now, what does it mean to be prehistoric? It means a period during which humans did not leave behind written records for historians to study. So obviously, historians study material and evidence other than written records, archaeological records, records of goods, pottery, objects, things like this. But in general, we say that written records are the foundation of the study of history. That it's written records that best express human emotions, the human heart, human desires, human ambitions, human disappointments, these things that the historian studies. And so societies that did not leave behind written records or that predated written records, we call these prehistoric societies. And so this is what we're going to begin by looking at today. So what can we say about the prehistoric Mediterranean? We know that there was an ice age. We know that this ice age came to an end. We know that by around 10,000 BC, without putting an exact date on it, there were humans living in different societies throughout the world. Now, the society and civilization that emerged after the ice age is known as the Paleolithic Age. During this age, human beings lived in hunter-gatherer societies. It was a period during which the earth was extremely fertile. You can imagine the glaciers are melting from the ice age, and so nature, animals, plants are really exploding, and human beings are able to sustain themselves in small family groups of about 60 that migrate to follow the seasons, to pick the fruits and the crops, and to feed and sustain themselves in this way. So they're living a lifestyle of migration. They are hunter-gatherers who are eating the plants and foodstuffs that they find around them. They also build tools out of the materials that they have to hand, in this case stone. They learn how to sharpen these stones into knives and into weapons, and then to use these tools to kill the animals and to eat meat. And so the humans are not only migrating to follow the seasons and to follow their plant food supply, but they're also following the animals. The animals are also following the foodstuffs, and so humans, animals, agriculture, it's all flowing in one cycle, but it's not specific to a particular place. And so we imagine that these human beings lived in a way that was not dissimilar to the animals that they hunted and ate. However, we can already see that human beings enjoyed a higher ability to problem solve, to reflect and to change, to reflect on and to change their conditions of life. That set them apart from the animals. That human beings already displayed that rationality that made them different. And it makes sense once you think about it, right? Because if you think about any animal, it's living the same way today that it was living thousands of years ago, with the exception of those that have been domesticated. And that's because of their interaction with humans. Whereas human beings have dramatically changed the way that they live. And so, or not, depending on the decisions that their communities have made. And so this reflects the greater intentionality, the greater rationality of human beings that sets them apart from the animals. If you're following along with the PowerPoint, this is when you're going to want to change to the next slide. How do human beings display these more sophisticated patterns of thought? We see this distinction in the intellectual actions of the early humans. And we start to see that human beings begin to think of themselves as part of a bigger, interconnected natural world. And so they start to think of themselves, they start to think of the individuals around them as part of this larger framework. And we see evidence of this, first of all, in the development of cemeteries. And this begins around 10,000 BC, a little after 10,000 BC. And so what the existence of cemeteries reflects is that for these human beings, there's an understanding that there is more to the universe than the here and now. There is more to the universe than just their own experiences. And so these human beings are coming to the conclusion that some elements of the broader universe that they inhabit are immaterial, that there's some kind of spiritual afterlife, that there are supernatural powers that oversee and influence the world. And so we start to see religious rituals dedicated in honor of dead ancestors who have passed on, religious rituals in honor of supernatural beings who these early humans believe are orchestrating the world. Now, some people today think that there is an afterlife. They think that there are spiritual components to the universe and to our lives. Some people think that that isn't the case. So whether the early humans were right about this or not is not the point. The point is that they recognize a universe that's bigger than themselves. Typically, when we see a society that is stagnant or in decline, it is hyper-focused. The members of the society are hyper-focused on themselves and what's going on in their own minds and their own perceptions of themselves. And this is distinct from a society where typically, as historians, we see that society growing and flourishing, is when that society is focused outside of itself, is focused on things outside of itself, does not see the individual experience as the sole metric for understanding reality. And so that's the behavior that's really interesting, that human beings can extrapolate beyond their own experiences, demonstrates the higher intellectual thought patterns that are taking place among even these very primitive humans. And it sets them apart again from the animals. You think about a horse, think about any kind of animal. In general, they are interpreting events very much through their own experiences. They're not thinking about how is this impacting someone else. And so this is part of the distinction that we see in human beings. And so these early human beings are trying to understand the world that they live in. And in trying to understand this world, the great mystery for them is the cycle of fertility and growth. Why is it that crops grow up, flourish, produce fruit, then die away, and then reappear again? How is it that animals are reproducing, some more successfully, some less successful? And so the early cults, the early religions of these people, they are very much oriented around fertility, worshipping the gods to pray for better fertility in their own lives, in the crops that they are, the food supplies that they're looking for, and praying to understand that fertility and see that fertility flourish. And so these are some of the behaviors that we associate with primitive humans that mark the problem-solving approach of humans that is going to enable them to begin to develop civilizations. We'll talk about that in the next video.